Not exactly living a fairy tale life. This is Sega Masters. It's safe to say that we've hit a rough patch in our chronology of the Master System's Western library, and this intro screen straight out of an early 1980s Apple II game doesn't offer much hope of that changing with today's episode. We're looking at King's Quest: Quest for the Crown, a US exclusive that was developed by a company called Microsmiths and marks the third and final Master System offering from third-party publisher Parker Brothers. And it is the third graphic adventure-style title to appear on the Master System, following Alf and Alex Kidd in High Tech World. Only this time it's a conversion of Sierra Online's hit computer title that all but birthed the genre as we know it. Yes, on the eve of the Master System's dark period, Parker once again felt the need to dust off yet another old computer hit years after its relevance had expired and bring it to the console for whatever reason. Parker Brothers certainly made waves at the 1988 Summer CES when they became one of the only third-party publishers to side with Sega instead of Nintendo in the US video game market, though both companies' mutual connection to Tonka was the main factor. However, they ultimately ended up releasing just 3 cartridges for Sega's console, all of which were tied into old computer titles. At least our first cartridge was something interesting, a consoleized version of the PC edutainment hit Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, that presented the original version's gameplay in a format that seemingly fit in better on a 1980s cartridge console. In retrospect, the changes may seem unnecessary, but Carmen was still unique and played decently for what it was. Sadly, Parker wouldn't put the same effort into their other Master System offerings. The 2 additional cartridges they ended up publishing were both rather vanilla ports of computer games that may have been hits in their time, but were already considered archaic by the time 1989 rolled around. We looked at one of them not too long ago, Montezuma's Revenge, a pre-Super Mario platformer that Parker themselves once published for various gaming platforms back in the summer of 1984. It wasn't terrible per se, but it stuck too closely to the original version and played a little too much like a 5-year-old title for most gamers' taste, as Parker failed to take the opportunity to add some modern features or enhancements to help it not feel so much like a forgotten relic. At least Montezuma didn't feel completely out of place within the Master System library due to its arcade-style nature, even if it was released a few years too late to make any real impact. That brings us to King's Quest, which would turn out to be Parker's final contribution to Sega's 8-bit console. And it was indeed a head-scratching choice to bring to the Master System, since slow-moving graphic adventures weren't exactly in high demand on a platform that prided itself on delivering fast-paced arcade-style action, especially a port of a title that was already considered somewhat obsolete by the time of its appearance on the console. King's Quest takes us to the Kingdom of Daventry, a troubled fantasy realm where some of the famous fables and fairy tales of yore somehow coexist. You take part in this tale as the gallant knight Sir Graham, who's been summoned to appear before the benevolent yet ailing King Edward. The first few minutes of the game are spent merely entering the castle and making your way through this long hallway to the throne room where Edward awaits. After speaking with the king following the bow of respect, he'll lay out what your objective is. King Edward tells you that he knows his end is near, and with no child of his own he wishes to name you the heir to the throne. However, you must first prove yourself worthy of being his successor by finding 3 magical treasures that he was cheated out of not too long ago, and are critical to Daventry's survival. If you can recover the magic shield, the magic mirror, and the magic chest of gold, the throne will be yours. So Graham sets off on his quest for the crown, which is more perilous than you can imagine. And you'll quickly discover that's not an exaggeration. The original King's Quest may not look like much nowadays, but it's easy to forget how much of a game changer it was upon its debut in the summer of 1984. The creation of Sierra Online co-founder Roberta Williams, King's Quest is often considered the godfather of modern graphic adventures. Previous such titles were basically interactive storybooks with still pictures where you occasionally tapped in commands with a keyboard to direct the narrative. King's Quest, on the other hand, was one of the first that allowed you to actually move the main character around the screen and watch the animation as he or she actually interacts with other objects on the screen, though you still had to tap in commands with a keyboard. In an odd twist of fate, King's Quest was originally conceived as a showpiece for IBM's PC Junior computer, which quickly tanked in the marketplace. Fortunately, the game was swiftly ported to more viable computer platforms and became a massive hit for Sierra, who would use the game's success to build something of a graphic adventure empire, with several top-selling franchises to their credit. So it's puzzling how Parker thought gamers would want to play the 5-year-old original game on the Master System in 1989, after plenty of other graphic adventure titles had since made numerous improvements to the formula King's Quest established, including its own sequels. In fact, when King's Quest made its appearance on Sega's console, the 4th installment in the series had already been on home computers for over a year, and represented quantum leaps in both gameplay and presentation compared to the first game. Sadly, rather than port King's Quest IV or any other advanced graphic adventure title to the Master System, Parker and Microsmith went with the aged original. And as we'll see, it's not like they did very much to give this port a chance to really succeed in the console realm. Once you're set loose on your quest, you're given almost free rein as how to go about obtaining the magical artifacts, with multiple paths to the endgame possible. That said, much of your time is spent wandering around the game world, picking up any and all objects you come across just in case they somehow prove useful in your quest, even though not every item you can collect will actually get used. Oddly enough, the kingdom seems deserted for the most part, though a few screens do contain an encounter with either a friend who will do something to help you out, or an enemy looking to end your journey on the spot. The cart will helpfully let you know which is which. Of course, the first question is how to actually do anything in this game, since the Master System obviously lacks a keyboard to type commands. Apparently, Microsmith's solution was to offer 2 types of interfaces, each of which is accessed with either of the control buttons. One button brings up a set of general actions for all screens, such as swim, climb, or look around, while the other button pulls up a pair of lists that allows you to interact with objects on the screen or in your inventory by pairing up an item with any relevant verbs to make a short sentence fragment, not unlike the adventure games LucasArts was producing at the time. This setup works for the most part, though it can feel cumbersome at times, especially after you collected a lot of items and have to cycle through the rather lengthy lists. Now, King's Quest is a pure graphic adventure from start to finish, which means reaching the end goal depends entirely on solving puzzles, with no actual combat or platforming or anything else you normally associate with a 1980s cartridge found here. On one hand, that means you won't have to suffer through any poorly done arcade sequences, especially the ones that were shoehorned in High Tech World or ALF in an attempt to help those titles feel more console-ish. All the riddles found in the original computer version are intact in this port, and most of the solutions merely require using the right item at the proper location, usually to get the next item you need to possibly solve another upcoming puzzle. Unfortunately, the puzzle solving itself can get frustrating in short order, since King's Quest often doesn't do a good job of providing clues to what item you might need in a given situation. And you could find yourself at a loss of what to actually do unless you consult a guide. One such puzzle involves figuring out how to feed this impoverished woodcutter and his wife in order to obtain his fiddle. Odds are you'd never guess without a walkthrough that you need to give him the bowl that you might have found in the forest, or that it turns out to be a magic bowl that can fill itself with stew if you simply tell it to do so. This is knowledge you probably wouldn't discover on your own without a lot of random trial and error, which gets tedious before too long. And of course, solving the puzzles does depend on actually having the correct item in your possession in the first place. You could easily find yourself unable to progress because you just happen to be missing the key object needed to meet that challenge. At the same time, many of the obstacles do have more than one answer to them, so it's not too difficult to make headway with a bit of experimentation. Another issue is how it often feels like the programmers were expecting questers to be well versed in the famous stories that are represented in this realm, as such knowledge is imperative to make any real progress in this quest. For example, this troll is blocking a bridge you need to cross, and isn't going to just get out of your way. If you remember certain tales, you'll know that a troll's mortal enemy is a goat, so you need to find and recruit a goat to do your bidding. Fortunately, a pen can be located a few screens nearby, which just happens to contain a goat you can enlist with a carrot. If you don't kill your potential friend first, which is actually an option for whatever reason, though doing so will pretty much softlock yourself. Once you get the goat's attention, you simply need to lead your new pal to the troll bridge and he'll do the rest to clear your path. Sadly, not all the game's puzzles are that simple. Those who played the original version of King's Quest may remember a convoluted riddle involving guessing Rumpelstiltskin's name in order to attain an essential item. Only you couldn't just spell the name straight up. You had to apply some warped logic to produce the key word needed to pass the challenge. That notorious puzzle has unfortunately been carried over to this port, and in this case you need to move a cursor around and select the letters to spell out the name if you somehow deduce it. Then again, if you guess incorrectly 3 times, you still win a consolation prize that will also allow you to progress in your journey, just on a different path. So it's not surprising that many questers intentionally throw this challenge just to be done with it. If the somewhat frustrating puzzle solving isn't enough, you also have to deal with the seemingly random ways this game can suddenly kill you without warning. An unfortunate tradition of most Sierra adventure titles that was also carried over to this conversion. One glaring example is this rock you need to move over in order to obtain a dagger hidden underneath it. You merely need to walk over to it and say push rock, but if you're standing behind it instead of off to the side, you somehow end up crushing yourself and the game is over just like that. Another annoyance is how simply traveling between certain screens can be hazardous, since the landscapes often don't line up correctly from one area to the next. In some cases you move to the next screen not suspecting anything, only to suddenly fall to your death unable to save yourself. These constant sudden deaths can quickly get on your nerves, but at least you can save your progress so you don't have to start completely over after every fatality. However, even saving and resuming your game is an unnecessary hassle, since you're forced to rely on rather lengthy passwords to record your progress, instead of a battery save like every other adventure cartridge is using around this time. While the password can be obtained at any time, it's tedious to write it down and even more time consuming to input back in every time you want to continue your journey. And that's basically all there is to King's Quest, just walking around nearly deserted landscapes, obtaining items and figuring out how to use them to make progress in your quest, all while trying to avoid cheap deaths. Such a slow-paced formula may have worked just fine in the realm of computer games, but it wasn't going to endear itself to the console crowd who've been fed a steady diet of more exciting arcade-style exercises. Not helping this cart's cause is how it sticks too closely to the original version with no new features or enhancements thrown in, just like Montezuma's Revenge. As I touched on earlier, the first King's Quest had aged poorly over the years, and its rather bare-bones quest and simple presentation had already been rendered just about obsolete by the more refined graphic adventures that have come along since. Sierra themselves must have had the same thoughts, since around this time they were working on an enhanced remake of the original game for home computers, which would be released the following year. Granted, it was more or less the same game at its core, but it not only boasted some enhanced visuals, it also fully supported sound cards with actual ambient sounds and background music, and the programmers even took the opportunity to flesh out the storyline somewhat. It was certainly a noble attempt to give the classic game a more updated look and feel, even though not all fans of the original version warmed up to the remake, and still don't to this day. The Master System port of King's Quest also needed a similar treatment to keep up with the times, such as updated visuals or new puzzles or anything. Instead, this version merely emulates the original's dated presentation and nothing more. Plenty of colors are used to craft the vibrant landscapes, yet most of the screens are just still pictures with almost nothing going on. And the few cartoony looking sprites that do populate the game world are nothing special with only a few frames of animation at best. It's even more glaring how this port still unnecessarily cuts corners as far as significant events go, as if it was the 1984 version. Whether it's defeating this dragon with a bucket of water, or sending some leprechauns into a dancing frenzy with the fiddle, or the Billy Goat puzzle we saw earlier, all you get is a text box describing what happened with no animation whatsoever. Such shortcuts were probably necessary in early 1980s computers, but on the Master System, there's no reason not to actually see these things happen instead of just being told about it. And as you've already noticed, other than the intro and brief ditties that play when something happens, this game is played in near total silence. Again, some ambient noise or background music could have easily been added for this version. Finally, it doesn't take long to discover just how short this game actually is. Once you know all the solutions, King's Quest can be completed in about 10 minutes. And while you can take several different paths to the conclusion, the ending is the same every time. Thus, you have no real reason to ever play it again after you beat it once. So what to ultimately make of King's Quest on the Master System? It certainly provides a unique experience among the system's catalog, and this conversion does its job in bringing the original to Sega's platform more or less intact, giving console gamers the opportunity to experience the influential computer hit for themselves. But given what we've already seen what the Master System can do, this card also leaves you feeling that programmers could and should have done much more than simply mimic the original 1984 release, which had already been left in the dust by the more refined graphic adventures that had come along since. Microsmiths either never realized that Sega's console was certainly capable of handling something similar to the 1990 remake, or were content to merely do the bare minimum to translate the game to the console and call it a day. In either case, a bare-bones port of an already outdated game wasn't going to move the needle on the Master System, and this port doesn't offer any unique puzzles or features or anything you won't find in any other conversion. All in all, King's Quest is a disappointing card to close the book on Parker Brothers' rather unremarkable run with the Master System. And unless you really feel the need to play an old-school adventure game on Sega's console, there are better quests for Sega adventurers to take on, and better ways for fans to relive the original adventure.